Rain hammered the asphalt like a drumbeat of urgency, each drop striking the world with the weight of something unspoken, something heavy. The street lamps flickered against the dark clouds as Officer Malik's boots slid across puddles, heart thundering in rhythm with the sirens wailing somewhere down the block. At his side, Rex, his German Shepherd partner, moved with a fluid grace born from years of training, muscles taut, ears flicking at every shadow. The night smelled of wet concrete and fear, a tension that wrapped itself around them like a second skin. Malik's mind raced, not with strategy, but with a gnawing dread he couldn't name. The call had been clear: hostage, armed suspect, no time. But what lay beyond the next corner was invisible, unpredictable. Rex nudged him gently, grounding him, a reminder that whatever came, they faced it together. Then a deafening crash echoed from the alley ahead. Instinct hit like lightning. Rex barked sharply, teeth bared, and Malik felt a cold drop of foreboding sink into his chest, knowing this night would carve itself into memory in ways neither of them could foresee. The night had a weight to it, a heaviness that pressed down on the city like a wet blanket. Rain fell in thick sheets, drumming against rooftops, sliding off fire escapes, and pooling in gutters that overflowed onto the cracked sidewalks. Officer Malik's boots hissed against the puddles, the rhythmic splashes echoing like a heartbeat, each one reminding him that tonight nothing would be ordinary. He pulled the collar of his jacket tight against the rain, but it did little to stop the cold from seeping into his bones. Beside him, Rex, the German Shepherd who had been his partner for 4 years, trotted with quiet assurance, fur slick but shining, muscles rippling beneath the wet coat, eyes scanning every shadow, every movement. There was a synchronicity between them, a silent conversation carried in glances and shifts in stance, a language only they spoke. The call had come just an hour ago. An armed suspect barricaded in an abandoned warehouse, hostages reported inside. Adrenaline had surged the moment the dispatcher's voice crackled over the radio, cutting through the background hum of the precinct like a knife. Malik's hand still felt the residual tingle from checking his weapon, patting Rex's flank in a gesture that was both grounding and ritualistic. The world outside seemed to distort in anticipation, the drizzle creating a blurred haze around streetlights, turning the familiar urban landscape into a distorted, almost alien plane. Malik's eyes flicked to Rex again, noting the way his ears tilted slightly, sensing the distant sounds of movement that humans could not perceive, the scuff of a boot, the shift of an object too heavy for someone to lift, silently. The dog's nose twitched, picking up scents carried on the wind, the smell of wet earth, gasoline from a broken pipe, and something else. Something metallic, dangerous, alive. Malik's heart tightened. He had trained for these scenarios countless times, drilled for split-second reactions, but nothing prepared a person for the tension of the real thing, the kind that curled in the pit of your stomach and refused to let go. The warehouse rose ahead, a hulking silhouette against the dim light of the city. Broken windows stared like empty eyes, their jagged edges catching the reflection of wet street lamps, sending shards of scattered light onto the slick pavement. The alley leading to the entrance was narrow, walls slick with moss and grime, graffiti bleeding across surfaces like the last desperate cries of forgotten voices. Malik crouched instinctively, pressing a hand against Rex's flank. The dog's body was taut, ready, a living coiled spring. Malik could feel the tension vibrating through him, a shared pulse of anticipation. "Keep your eyes sharp," he murmured, barely above a whisper, though he knew Rex could hear every nuance. The dog's tail flicked once, almost imperceptibly, and Malik understood. It was acknowledgement, a promise, a bond forged in countless missions past. The rain intensified, the droplets bouncing off the concrete like tiny hammers, and the city seemed to hold its breath with them. The sound of the storm masked other noises, the suspects' movements, the faint cries of the hostages. But Malik's gaze remained fixed on the warped doorway of the warehouse, knowing that behind that darkness lay a decision that could change everything. A sudden shift caught Rex's attention first, a faint metallic scrape so slight that Malik might have missed it if not for the dog's reaction. His ears pricked, body leaning slightly forward, muscles tensing. Malik mirrored him instinctively. The rain, the fog, the wet concrete, all faded into the periphery as focus sharpened into a single point of clarity. The imminent presence of danger. Every instinct screamed. Every memory of past operations rose in tandem with the storm's roar. Malik's pulse quickened, throat tightening. This was no drill, no simulation, no predictable pattern. This was reality, raw and unyielding. He moved carefully, keeping low, boots barely making a sound, fingers brushing against the familiar grip of his firearm. The cold rain mixed with the damp sweat on his skin, making every nerve endings alive with sensation. Rex's paw touched his side, a subtle reminder. They were partners, but tonight the stakes were higher than ever. As they approached the warehouse door, Malik's mind flickered through every possible outcome. The suspect could surrender, the hostages could be unharmed, or everything could spiral into chaos in a heartbeat. Through the rain-streaked darkness, he could see the faint flicker of movement inside the warehouse, shadows twisting against walls, shapes shifting with the uneven light. Rex's growl, low and guttural, rolled like distant thunder. Malik froze, heart pounding, listening. The growl was not casual. It was a warning, a signal. Malik's eyes darted, searching, calculating angles, paths, and exits. The alleyway smelled of wet concrete and rust, the air thick with tension, the city holding its breath. Time felt suspended, elongated, every second stretching like taffy. Malik exhaled slowly, feeling the storm of adrenaline settle into a steady rhythm. He adjusted Rex's harness, whispered a word of reassurance, and took a careful step forward. The dog moved with him, perfectly attuned, muscles coiled and ready to spring. The warehouse loomed, its doors partially ajar, shadows consuming the interior like ink spilled across the floor. Malik's gaze locked onto the faint outline of the suspect, hunched, tense, dangerous. He swallowed hard, feeling the weight of responsibility settle across his shoulders. Rex nudged him gently, a physical tether to reality, a reminder that they faced this together. And then the first sound, a sharp bang followed by a scream, split the night. Malik's world narrowed to the duo of himself and Rex, instincts kicking in over thought. The rain-slicked alley disappeared, replaced by the immediacy of action, the certainty that the next steps would define lives, loyalty, and courage in ways he could barely imagine. Every fiber of their beings, human and canine, aligned with the same purpose, to protect, to endure, to face the darkness without flinching. Malik's mind was a storm of clarity and chaos as he crouched behind the wall with Rex pressed close. This was more than duty. This was trust, love, and the unspoken bond between man and dog, forged in sweat, blood, and countless shared moments that could never be replicated. And somewhere in the dark, beyond the reach of lamplight and raindrops, the night waited to decide their fate. The warehouse door shuddered under Malik's hand as he pressed closer, the rain from outside streaming through broken panels, turning the floor inside into a slick mosaic of water and grime. Shadows danced across the walls, sharp and jagged, thrown by flickering emergency lights from some long-dead fixture. Malik's pulse was a drumbeat in his ears, synchronized with a distant patter of rain and the low, urgent growl from Rex beside him. The dog's body was a coiled spring, taut with anticipation, each muscle defined beneath wet, glistening fur. Malik could feel the raw intelligence in Rex's stance, the perfect blend of instinct and training that no human calculation could replicate. Then movement, a dark figure shifting at the far end of the hall, holding something metallic. Malik's gut seized. The suspect's arm lifted, and for a split second, time fractured into infinitesimal beats. Rex barked sharply. A command and a warning rolled into one, and Malik instinctively dropped to a crouch, eyes scanning for civilians, exits, and cover. The suspect froze, startled by the sudden intrusion of sound into the oppressive silence. It was the kind of tense pause where life itself feels suspended, where even the breath in your lungs seems too loud. Malik signaled the other officers, but Rex had already moved. In a heartbeat, the dog lunged forward, paws skimming the wet floor with lethal precision, teeth bared, eyes locked onto the immediate threat. Malik's heart caught in his chest. He had seen Rex react countless times, but tonight, the stakes were terrifyingly high. The dog's body collided with the suspect in a blur of motion, a whirlwind of fur and raw force that sent the man stumbling backward. A gunshot echoed off the walls, sharp and jarring, and Malik felt it in his chest, a physical shock of fear and adrenaline. "Rex, no, stay!" Malik shouted, but the words were swallowed by the chaos, drowned by the rain and the snap of gunfire. The suspect scrambled, trying to regain control, but Rex was relentless, teeth clamping onto the man's arm, dragging him to the ground. Malik sprinted forward, boots skidding on the wet floor, slipping slightly as the floor betrayed him with slick deceit. He could hear the struggle, grunts, the scuff of feet, the desperate metallic clang of the suspect's weapon hitting the ground. Rex growled, a deep, vibrating sound that resonated through the bones, unflinching, unyielding, fearless. The suspect twisted, struggling, and Malik could see the panic in his eyes. Rex's jaws were a vice, but the man's arm swung violently, striking the dog. Malik felt a flash of terror pierce his chest. Rex flinched but did not release. The dog had made the choice in a split second that Malik would never forget. Protect life, no matter the cost. Malik lunged, grabbing the suspect's collar, pulling with every ounce of strength as the dog maintained his hold. The world contracted to a singular focus. The suspect, Rex, the hostages who might still be trapped somewhere in the dim recesses of the warehouse. Time slowed, fragmented by adrenaline. Malik could feel the pounding of his own heart in his ears, the rapid intake of breath, the wet fabric of his jacket clinging to his skin, the slick floor betraying every step. Rain dripped from a broken skylight above, splashing onto Rex's fur and mixing with the heat of exertion, the steam rising from his soaked coat. Every sound was magnified. The struggle, the scuffle, the shallow, sharp breaths of Rex, the desperate attempts of the suspect to escape. Malik knew that in this moment, heroism was raw, immediate, and indiscriminate. It was measured in heartbeats and courage, not medals or recognition. Rex barked again, commanding the suspect to freeze, and Malik could see the tension in the man's shoulders, the flicker of fear that hadn't been there a second ago. Then the man made a sudden, reckless move toward the hostages. Malik's stomach lurched. Instinct overtook thought. He shouted, "Rex, intercept!" And the dog sprang, a blur of calculated precision, intercepting the suspect with a force that nearly sent both crashing into the wet concrete floor. Malik followed, sliding on the slick surface, grabbing the man's arm, holding him steady while Rex's weight pinned him in place. It was over almost as suddenly as it began. The suspect lay restrained, groaning, his weapon knocked harmlessly aside. Malik exhaled, chest heaving, adrenaline still surging. But then, horror. A flash of movement too quick to process. Rex had twisted awkwardly, landing at an odd angle after blocking a blow aimed at Malik. Malik's heart stopped. The dog's eyes met his, pain etched in the depths, a silent apology, a warning, a final bond. Malik fell to his knees beside him, fingers pressing against his partner's flank, feeling the warm, sticky wetness of blood mingled with rain. "Stay with me, Rex. Come on, stay, please." Malik's voice cracked, raw with panic and disbelief. Around him, the officers moved cautiously, reverent in their fear of what had just happened. They had witnessed the bravery, the split-second heroics, the living embodiment of courage in a creature trained to obey but capable of love. Malik's tears mixed with rain, cold streaks running down his cheeks as he pressed his forehead to Rex's, feeling the shallow rise and fall of the chest that had saved him, that had saved lives tonight, now trembling under the weight of sacrifice. Every second stretched painfully. Malik remembered the early mornings of training, the long nights of patrol, the quiet walks through precinct halls with Rex at his side, the countless small gestures of loyalty, nudges, protective stances, eyes that seemed to read his every thought. And now, in this warehouse, all of it converged into one impossible moment, the ultimate act of courage and the ultimate fragility of life. Malik's mind raced. The hostages were safe, the suspect restrained. Yet none of it mattered compared to the warm, living presence that lay before him, breathing unevenly, wounded, heroic. The rain continued to fall, now soft and insistent, washing the grime and fear into rivulets along the cracked floor. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting shadows that seemed to bow in silent reverence. Malik whispered stories, names, memories, anything to anchor Rex, anything to pull him back from the edge of the void he had so willingly stepped toward. Paramedics arrived, boots splashing through puddles, hands moving quickly, efficiently, but Malik barely registered them. His world had narrowed to the body of his partner, the golden brown eyes flickering faintly, still aware, still fighting. He pressed against him, murmuring through tears, through the noise, through the storm, feeling the weight of what courage demanded. Rex had given everything in the span of a heartbeat. Malik's throat constricted. He knew that even if the dog survived, nothing would ever be the same. The bond had transformed into something sacred, fragile, eternal. And in that moment, amidst the rain, the blood, the shadows, Malik understood the truth he had always known but never needed to confront so starkly. Heroism isn't measured in medals or applause. It's measured in the moments you live to protect another. The moments you face danger knowing the cost might be ultimate. Rex had leapt into danger without hesitation, without calculation, without fear. And Malik, kneeling beside him, heart raw and breaking, knew that life, loyalty, and courage would never be ordinary again. The warehouse was quiet now, but the silence was heavier than any storm. Rain had slowed to a thin drizzle, leaving the ground slick with puddles that reflected the dim, flickering light above. Malik knelt beside Rex, the dog's once proud stance now fragile, trembling beneath him. Blood mixed with rainwater, soaking through fur and uniform alike, and Malik pressed his hands gently but firmly against the wound, willing strength into the dog's body through sheer force of presence. His chest heaved, each breath sharp and desperate, echoing through the cavernous, broken interior. Around him, the other officers hovered in tense silence, unsure how to bridge the gulf between action and aftermath. The suspect had been restrained and removed, the hostages escorted to safety, yet the victory was hollow. Every instinct Malik had screamed that this wasn't over, not yet. He felt the weight of the world pressing down, the gravity of life and death concentrated into a single, quivering form lying at his knees. Rex lifted his head weakly, eyes flicking toward Malik with an unspoken plea, a fragile reassurance. Malik felt tears sting his eyes, mingling with the drizzle on his cheeks. "Stay with me, buddy. Just a little longer," he whispered, his voice cracking, each word drenched in fear, love, and grief. Paramedics arrived swiftly, boots splashing in the shallow pools of water, voices clipped and professional, yet tempered with unspoken respect. Malik stepped back reluctantly, hands still hovering over Rex as if his mere presence could keep the dog alive. The medics worked quickly, assessing, wrapping, administering, but Malik noticed every detail. The tremble of Rex's paw, the shallow rise of his chest, the faint whimper that broke the night's oppressive silence. Each small signal of life was a lifeline, a tether to hope that Malik clung to with desperate intensity. The air was thick with rain, the scent of wet concrete, iron, and antiseptic mingling, creating a sensory tapestry that wrapped around Malik in suffocating intimacy. He remembered every morning he had trained with Rex, every late-night patrol, every minor scrape and victory, and the profound trust that had been built between them. The memory of the first day he had met Rex, a spirited and eager young German shepherd, rose vividly. The way the dog had looked up at him with bright, intelligent eyes, sensing purpose before understanding words. And now, years later, that same intelligence, courage, and loyalty lay battered yet unbroken at his feet. Malik's mind replayed the moment Rex had lunged at the suspect, every second etched with crystalline clarity. The blur of fur, teeth, and adrenaline, the flash of fear in the suspect's eyes, and Rex's unwavering focus, all of it pressed into Malik's memory with brutal precision. He had seen bravery countless times in his career, but nothing compared to the raw, unflinching heroism of a dog who understood instinctively what humans often forgot. Protection was not optional, courage was not conditional, and love was a force that could transcend reason. Around them, the warehouse seemed suspended in time. Broken glass glinted wetly, puddles rippled faintly in the shallow gusts of wind drifting through shattered doors, and shadows stretched like elongated fingers along the walls. The storm outside had softened, but inside, Malik felt the cold seep into his bones, a physical manifestation of grief. He pressed his forehead to Rex's side, feeling the faint tremors of breath, and murmured apologies and gratitude simultaneously, a broken litany that made no sense to anyone but him. "I'm so sorry. Thank you. I don't know what I'd do without you." The other officers shifted uneasily, glances exchanged, unspoken words hanging in the air like thick fog. There was no need for conversation. The gravity of what had occurred transcended language. Malik could sense the collective heartbeat of the room slowing, synchronizing with his own sorrow, a quiet acknowledgement of the price paid. Every instinct screamed that Rex's sacrifice had been monumental, a shield against fate itself. Yet Malik felt powerless against the inevitable reality encroaching on them. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours. Malik's hands were numb from the cold, his uniform soaked, but he could not tear himself away. He held the leash loosely in one hand, an object that had symbolized companionship, protection, and shared purpose, now heavy with absence and potential. Rainwater dripped from the broken ceiling onto the concrete, creating a rhythm like a mournful drum, a heartbeat echoing the one that had slowed to fragility beneath his touch. He whispered stories to Rex, reciting small, mundane moments of life, the mornings spent in the park, the games of fetch after late-night patrols, the simple joys of being a dog and a human together in a dangerous world. Malik needed Rex to know, to remember, that their bond was not lost even if the body faltered. The warehouse doors creaked, a subtle reminder that the world outside had not stopped. Officers moved cautiously, cleaning up, surveying, yet Malik remained rooted in place, unwilling to surrender to the inexorable truth that loomed closer with every shallow breath. Rex shifted weakly, eyes flicking to Malik, and for a fleeting instant, Malik thought he saw the old spark, the dog's signature intelligence, the awareness that had saved so many lives. But then the movement slowed, grew weaker, and Malik's heart constricted. He gripped Rex's shoulders, whispering fervent encouragement, willing life back into him with sheer force of love. Eventually, the medic's hands pressed gently yet firmly, and Malik felt his fingers pushed aside. He could not help but watch, helpless as the dog was lifted, carried with precision yet inevitably vulnerable. Each step Rex took away from him felt like a piece of his own chest being carried off into the storm. Malik followed, boots slipping on wet concrete, heartbeat pounding, each breath shallow and ragged. The ambulance door closed, sealing Rex inside a metallic cocoon of urgency and sterile light. Malik pounded the roof with his fist, a futile gesture against the enormity of loss, and the rain soaked him further, washing over his grief without easing it. Hours later, Malik sat alone outside the precinct, rain still lingering in soft mist, puddles reflecting the fractured glow of streetlights. He stared at his boots, at the wet leash lying beside him, at the echoes of courage and life that had passed through him tonight. The night had demanded everything, and Malik had realized, too painfully, too sharply, that some costs were eternal. His hands trembled, his chest tight, yet beneath the crushing weight of grief, a faint pulse of understanding emerged. Bravery is never forgotten, and love, once forged, is indelible. Rex's sacrifice had created a silence that screamed louder than words, a lesson in courage written in fur, blood, and unwavering loyalty. Malik whispered into the empty night, voice raw, "You were more than a partner, more than a friend. You were courage itself." The mist swirled, wrapping around him, carrying the memory of wet fur, golden eyes, and the unwavering heartbeat that had guided him through danger and darkness. In that silence, heavy and sacred, Malik understood that the storm had passed, yet its mark would endure forever, not as pain alone, but as the enduring echo of a hero who had given all and asked nothing in return. The precinct was quiet, almost painfully so, the usual hum of activity muted into something reverent, almost sacred. Officers moved through the hallways like shadows, their steps measured, their voices hushed. The fluorescent lights flickered intermittently, casting long, wavering shadows that stretched like silent witnesses across the walls. Malik sat at his desk, hands clasped, staring blankly at the wet leash lying atop a stack of paperwork. The weight of the night pressed down on him again, relentless, unforgiving. Every instinct screamed that nothing could replace what had been lost, yet the memory of Rex's courage shimmered in his mind, unbroken and eternal. Then the door opened. Malik looked up and the air seemed to shift. The retired commander stepped into the room, his presence commanding without a word. Years of service etched into the lines of his face, eyes sharp yet carrying a depth of quiet understanding that only time could grant. His coat hung neatly, shoulders squared, but there was a subtle weariness, a weight of experience that seemed almost tangible. The room grew still. Even the soft hum of fluorescent lights seemed to pause in recognition. Officers straightened instinctively, as if some unspoken order had been issued by mere proximity. The commander's gaze swept across the room, resting finally on Malik. There was no judgment, no admonishment, only acknowledgement. "I heard about Rex," he said quietly, voice low but carrying the resonance of authority tempered by empathy. "I know what he meant to you. I know what he did tonight." Malik felt a lump rise in his throat, his eyes stinging. Words failed him, but the commander did not rush him, did not press for acknowledgement. He simply stood there, a living embodiment of respect and understanding, allowing silence to carry its weight. He moved slowly through the room, stopping in front of a framed photograph of Rex on the wall. The dog's golden eyes, sharp and intelligent, seemed to gleam even through the glass. The commander's hand hovered briefly over the frame, lingering as if touching memory itself. A dog's like him, he said, voice soft. They don't just follow orders, they choose to protect. They understand loyalty in a way humans rarely do. And tonight, he chose the highest path. The one we ask of all officers, but he carried it without hesitation, without fear. Malik's throat tightened. The words were not meant to console. They were a testament, a recognition of courage beyond the ordinary. The commander began to walk slowly, recounting stories of dogs and officers lost over decades of service. Names, moments, acts of bravery long buried in memories surfaced in his voice, each one a tribute to lives that had mattered, sacrifices that had shaped the force. Malik listened, each story a mirror reflecting both loss and honor, grief and resilience. There was no attempt to diminish Rex's death. Instead, the commander elevated it, situating it within a larger narrative of courage, commitment, and the unbreakable bond between human and animal partners. Malik realized that he had been holding his grief in isolation, the storm of emotion threatening to drown him in private. But the commander's presence reframed it, transforming despair into something sacred, almost ceremonial. The story spoke not just to him, but to the collective memory of the officers around him. Each word seemed to pulse with life, echoing in the stillness of the precinct, bridging the gap between loss and honor. Malik's hands unclenched, resting lightly on the wet leash, feeling a subtle shift in his own perspective. The commander paused, turning to the assembled officers. "Remember," he said firmly, "the courage does not always survive, but it always endures. Rex's spirit, his choices, his loyalty, will shape every decision we make from this day forward. Honor him by living, by protecting, by refusing to forget." There was a weight in his words, a solemnity that transcended the ordinary cadence of speech. Malik felt it resonate deep within him, the lingering echo of a hero's presence made eternal through memory and acknowledgement. He stepped closer to Malik, placing a hand on his shoulder, a brief grounding gesture that carried more than guidance. "You are not alone," the commander said simply, "and none of us are." Malik felt a shiver pass through him, not of cold but of recognition, of grief shared, of courage validated, of a bond honored. The presence of the man who had guided generations of officers created a space for reflection, for sorrow to coexist with pride, for memory to transform into legacy. Outside, the rain had ceased entirely. Streetlights reflected off wet asphalt, illuminating the precinct with a soft golden glow. Malik stepped to the window, looking out at the city he had sworn to protect. The weight on his chest remained, but now it was tempered with understanding, with reverence, with a quiet resolve that life and duty must continue. The storm had passed, leaving behind wet streets, a renewed skyline, and the echoes of courage etched into every heartbeat, every memory. The commander left shortly thereafter, his presence lingering like a shadow of wisdom and quiet strength. Malik turned back to the photograph of Rex, fingers brushing the frame gently. The leash lay across his desk, a tangible reminder of sacrifice, loyalty, and love. He whispered, "You'll never be forgotten, buddy. I promise you that." The words floated in the still air, carried by memory, rain, and reflection. As the night gave way to early dawn, Malik felt a subtle shift within himself. Grief had not vanished. It could not. But the pain had become something sacred, something that could guide action rather than immobilize. Rex's legacy, immortalized in courage and love, had left an indelible mark, not just on Malik, but on every officer who had witnessed, even indirectly, the ultimate act of devotion. Malik exhaled, chest tight, feeling the weight lighten fractionally, replaced by a determination born of understanding, to honor Rex by living with courage, with loyalty, and with heart. Dawn broke slowly over the city, spilling pale gold light across the wet streets, the puddles reflecting fractured glimmers of a new day. Malik stood alone outside the precinct, clutching Rex's leash loosely in his hand, the fabric still damp from the previous night's rain. The air smelled of wet asphalt, the faint tang of iron from the warehouse blood still lingering in memory, and the crisp freshness of early morning. The city was waking, indifferent to the private storm of grief and reverence that still consumed him. Yet Malik felt a quiet resonance in the calm, as if the world itself had paused to honor the sacrifice he had witnessed. He knelt beside a small makeshift memorial of flowers and notes left by colleagues, friends, and even strangers who had heard of Rex's heroism. Each item was a testament, a fragment of memory solidifying into legacy. Malik traced a finger over a photograph, golden eyes staring back with unwavering intelligence and courage. The leash rested atop the folded flowers, a silent emblem of loyalty, of the countless walks, patrols, and missions shared. He could feel the faint warmth in his chest, a residual echo of Rex's heartbeat, a rhythm that would never truly fade. Malik remembered the warehouse in vivid detail. The slick concrete, the flash of movement, the metallic scrape of weapons, the sudden, terrifying moment when Rex had lunged to protect him. Every memory carried weight, a mosaic of fear, courage, and love. The city, once oppressive in its shadows and rain, now seemed to stretch into infinite possibilities. Life carried on, but Malik knew that some lessons, some acts of bravery, left indelible marks that would shape him forever. He rose, adjusting the leash in his hand, and took a slow walk around the precinct grounds. Every step echoed with remembrance, each puddle reflecting the fragments of memory, Rex's muscular form in mid-leap, the decisive bark, the protective stance that had saved countless lives. Malik breathed in deeply, letting the crisp morning air fill his lungs, grounding himself in both grief and gratitude. He thought of the retired commander's words, the stories of dogs and officers who had shaped the force through courage, loyalty, and selfless sacrifice. Those echoes resonated now, intertwined with his own experiences, forming a lineage of bravery and love that transcended death. He paused at the edge of the small courtyard, where a single lamppost cast a gentle circle of light. Malik set the leash down beside the memorial, brushing a hand over the damp flowers, and allowed himself a long, unguarded moment of reflection. Memories surged, Rex nudging him awake before a long patrol, the playful chase across wet grass, the quiet moments after a successful mission when the dog would rest his head against Malik's leg, content and trusting. Each recollection brought a pang of grief, yet also a profound warmth, the knowledge that Rex had chosen courage, had lived fully, and had loved unconditionally. As the sun rose higher, glinting off the wet streets, Malik felt the storm of emotion begin to settle into a quieter, enduring resonance. He knew grief would never vanish completely. Some losses carved themselves so deep into the soul that they became part of who you are. But he also recognized that courage, loyalty, and love endure beyond the constraints of mortality. Rex had given everything in service of these ideals, and Malik now carried them forward, not as a burden, but as a guiding force. Across the street, a lone dog barked in the distance, a fleeting sound that caught Malik's attention. He smiled faintly, imagining it as a whisper from Rex, a reminder that life continues, that courage is contagious, and that memory is alive in those who remain. Malik exhaled, shoulders straightening, and with a quiet reverence, he picked up the leash. It felt lighter now, a symbol of responsibility, memory, and the enduring power of love. He returned to the memorial, kneeling one final time, voice barely above a whisper. "You saved me, buddy. You saved all of us. I'll carry you with me, in every choice, every step, every act of courage. You'll never be forgotten." The morning air seemed to embrace the words, the sun breaking through clouds, illuminating the wet asphalt like liquid gold. Malik rose, feeling a delicate balance of grief and resolve, the memory of his partner no longer an ache but a guiding presence. The precinct came alive behind him, voices and footsteps returning, officers preparing for the day ahead. Yet Malik felt a quiet separation, a sacred space between him and the bustling world, a space that Rex had earned, a space that would remain forever. Each step he took toward the building carried remembrance, loyalty, and a silent vow to honor courage wherever it appeared. As he entered the precinct, the leash still in hand, Malik glanced once more at the sky. The rain had ceased entirely, leaving the streets gleaming alive and filled with possibility. The echo of Rex's courage lingered in every droplet of water, every shimmer of light, every beat of Malik's heart. And in that enduring silence, amidst the ordinary sounds of the city waking, a profound truth settled gently within him. Heroes never truly leave. Their courage, their loyalty, and their love ripple outward, touching all who witness it, shaping the world in ways unseen but profoundly felt. Malik exhaled deeply, shoulders squared, heart heavy but resolute, and whispered one final farewell. "A thank you, Rex, for everything. You were my partner, my guardian, my family, and I will carry your spirit with me always." Outside, the dawn shimmered on wet streets, and somewhere in the distance, a dog barked, a simple fleeting reminder that courage echoes eternally. that love leaves a mark and that even in absence, presence endures.